Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Overwatch League fan thoughts and analysis video. Today is the video for Stage 4, Week 5, the final week of the Overwatch League regular season for 2019. It's a sad day, very sad day. I really wish it wasn't the case, but we are here for the final episode of the regular season. There's still, of course, some playoff episodes to come. I'm going to do them every week. I'm not going to give you my overall bracket predictions because the bracket's going to be way too complicated. There's going to be a winner's bracket. There's going to be a loser's bracket. So I'll kind of go over some of my thoughts and talk about the matches that we know that are going to happen and whatnot. But that'll be something we worry about next week. For this week, we need to focus on my picks from last week and my picks for this weekend. So starting with last week, those picks should be on the screen now. I'm going to do the same thing I did last week. I'm just going to run through some of these picks, the ones that had no impact on playoffs, really, from teams that were eliminated or whatever. I'm just going to tell you what happened and move on. So, the Florida Mayhem beat the Boston Uprising. Hangzhou Spark beat the Dallas Fuel. It was a good win for the Spark. Obviously, the Fuel aren't a very good team, but it's still a good win for the Spark, for them trying to keep their top 6 hopes alive. So that was a good win for them. The Seoul Dynasty beating the Shanghai Dragons. This series wasn't even close. Seoul Dynasty absolutely rocked the Dragons in that series. Really put themselves in a really great position moving forward. The Dragons are not in as nearly a good position as they once were. So it's interesting. I think that the Dynasty are a team that I think have actually looked pretty solid this stage. They haven't looked amazing, but they've looked pretty solid. The one problem that they will probably run into is they will be the number 8 seed, most likely, in this play-in tournament, and that means that they would have to play the highest seeded winner from the matchup of 9 and 12 and 10 and 11. And that looks like it'll be the Guangzhou Charge. The Seoul Dynasty probably aren't going to beat the Guangzhou Charge, but we'll see what happens. On a Friday, the Atlanta Reign with a win over the Washington Justice. Huge win for the Reign, really puts them in a really good position to possibly make it into the top 6. But we'll get even more into that a little bit later. But a good win for them. Unfortunate loss for the Justice, of course, but they still finished the stage with a positive record. So that's good for them. They still have another match against Paris, but they won that one. And they had a 6-1 record to finish the stage. San Francisco Shock beat the Chengdu Hunters. That helps the LA Valiant a lot, but the LA Valiant still have a lot of work they need to do, and the Chengdu Hunters would have had to lose to the Houston Outlaws to guarantee the Valiant get in, and they did not. The Hangzhou Spark beat the LA Gladiators. Very big win for the Spark. That really helps them out when it comes to trying to lock up a top 6 spot. Well, they had a top 6 spot. Actually, I think they may clinch a top 6 spot with that win, but that puts them in an even better position to try to get to number 4 instead of number 5, which doesn't really matter all that much. There's no real difference between 4 and the 5 spot because you're going to play whoever's in. If you're the 4, you play the 5, or the 5, you play the 4. So it doesn't really help that much, but I guess long term it could help a little bit, and you maybe get a little more prize money. So I guess that's pretty good. We went to Saturday. Paris Eternal beat the Shanghai Dragons. Bad loss for Shanghai. Shanghai are really struggling now, and I don't really know what happened to them, but it's the fact that they can't run these triple DPS comps I think is really hurting them. LA Valiant beat the Boston Uprising, which means the LA Valiant are in a position. They're in a position where they can make playoffs. It's going to be very difficult for them. Philadelphia Fusion beat the Seoul Dynasty. That win, to me, kind of spells the end of the Seoul Dynasty season, though they have a pretty good position in the rankings. Like I said, they're going to have to play the Guangzhou Charge most likely in the play-in tournament, and the Guangzhou Charge are by far the best team in this meta right now, I would say. And the Chengdu Hunters beating Houston Outlaws was a 3-2 win for the Hunters. Really close match. If the Houston Outlaws could have pulled out that map 5 or, the other maps that they lost, Hunters would have been eliminated from the playoffs. Valiant would have been in. It would have been a really, really, really big match. But now, of course, we set up for the LA Valiant homestands to be even bigger for the Valiant if they want to make the season playoffs. On a Sunday, the Atlanta Reign beating the London Spitfire. Did not see that happening. I thought it was possible, but I thought the Atlanta Reign hadn't really been tested yet this stage. They didn't look all that great going into some of the... Well, they looked good teams, so it was a question mark of whether or not they could actually beat some of these really good teams. The LA Valiant, the London Spitfire are one of the best teams in the league right now. Probably top 6. And the Atlanta Reign completely obliterated them. They beat the Justice, they beat the Spitfire. Very good week for the Reign. and they have a really good shot at possibly being a top 5 team if the Gladiators beat the Valiant. But if they win out, they will be a top 6 team. Washington Justice beat the Paris Eternal. Florida Mayhem beat the Toronto Defiant, and the Guangzhou Charge beat the Dallas Fuel after that very, very, very long and fun pause on map 4 Havana. They ended up walking away with the 4-0 victory. So an 8-6 week for me. 1-3 though for big picks. So great week for me for that. But some teams in some really good positions, and it sets us up for, of course, important matches going into the LA Valiant homestand. So let's take a look at my picks for that homestand. And you may notice my weekly record has gone down 3 wins, and that's because I can't do math. And I just went back through to make sure I counted up my wins accurately to make sure they were correct, and they were not correct. So I had to fix those. So now they should be correct. 186-86 is my record right now. But let's start with Saturday. The Atlanta Reign taking on the Dallas Fuel. That's a match I don't think should be too difficult for the Reign. The Dallas Fuel do not look very good. So I think the Reign should walk away from that one with a victory. Next, the Boston Uprising taking on the New York Excelsior. NYXL have been struggling this stage. Whether or not they're sandbagging, it's too really, we can't really tell because they've been saying, "Oh yeah, we're sandbagging, haha, we're sandbagging," but also like, are they really sandbagging or are they just struggling? It's too early to tell. Really, when we get to playoffs, we'll be able to tell. But right now, it's too early. But Boston has looked pretty bad. I don't think New York should lose to them, so I'm gonna say New York gets the win. San Francisco Shock against Vancouver Titans. The only reason why this is not my big pick game is because of how important the battle for LA is. This game, I think, should be pretty good. The Shock, I think, are the better team by far right now than the Titans are. I think the Shock are the best team in the league, no question. So I think the Shock win this one, but it should be a good match. The Titans are always a fun team to watch when they play the Shock. Finally, the big pick game for Saturday is the LA Gladiators take on the LA Valiant. The battle for Los Angeles. This is the match of the week as well. I really want the Valiant to win this match. I want the Valiant to get into the playoffs. They are winning in. They win any of their 2 matches this week. They beat the Gladiators, or they beat the Shock, they're in. The problem is, it's against the Gladiators and the Shock, 2 very, very, very good teams. So the Valiant have a really, really, really tough road ahead of them if they want to get into the season playoffs. I think the Gladiators game is by far the more winnable of the 2. I think the Gladiators are a bit... And people have been having them in their power rankings at number 2 and number 3 and number 4 for this stage. I don't really think they're that good this stage. Their loss to the Spark kind of made me really feel that way. It wasn't even a close series, and the Spark haven't been playing that well this meta, so I certainly don't think they're as good as people have been kind of saying they are, but at the same time, I still don't think they are worse than the Valiant. I don't think they will lose to the Valiant, knowing how important that match is. The other thing is Valiant's series against Boston was a little close for comfort for me. If you're a Valiant fan, the first half was complete domination by the Valiant. Second half, Boston played very well, almost took it to a map 5. Now, granted, Boston is a second half team. They always have been. If you look at their map win percentage from the first half versus the second half, it's pretty telling that Boston performs better in the second half of matches. But it made me feel a little doubtful in the Valiant's abilities. It made me feel like they were struggling a little bit more. So for that reason, I'm picking the Gladiators. But just in general, I think the Gladiators have looked better this stage, though the Valiant do look good as well, and could definitely pull out a win. But we'll have to see what happens. Sunday, we have the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Shanghai Dragon. This is a huge match for the Spark if they want to lock up the number 4 spot overall. They need this win. If they want to be guaranteed number 4 in the standings, they need that win. Like I said, it doesn't really matter all that much. It doesn't really do anything for them differently than if they didn't get number 4 overall. Or they're still going to play the same teams. There's no real change there, but it's a huge, huge, huge match for them to potentially see themselves as a number 4 seed. Shanghai Dragons, of course, would like a win. They've been on a bit of a skid recently, so we'll see what happens. But it's a big match for both these teams. The Spark have looked better, though, this stage than the Dragons have, which is saying a lot because the Spark looked pretty bad up until last week. So Spark, to me, get that win. Next is the Atlanta Reign taking on the Boston Uprising. this is a win I think the Reign should take. I think the Reign have looked very good this stage. They're probably the second best team this stage, behind only the San Francisco Shock, and maybe the Guangzhou Charge as well. But the Reign have looked very good. I think they win that match. They put themselves in the top 6, knocking London out of the top 6. Never would have imagined that to happen, but it might. I should mention that Sefi, who is the head coach for the Atlanta Reign, did tweet out that they are focusing more on the patch for the playoffs. This past week, they spent more time focusing on the playoff patch than the current patch that they're playing on for this stage. And his reasoning behind that was just, hey, we know that we're in the top 12. Like, we would rather have more time to learn the heroes and the patch that's going to be the meta when it gets to the games that really matter, rather than maybe lose 1 or 2 matches against some of these not so great teams or some of these other top 12 teams. Like, we can still, if we lose, if we don't make the top 6, we make the top 12, but we're giving ourselves extra time to prepare for that meta anyway, so that if we are in the top 12, 7 through 12, we can win matches there because we're prepared. So it's an interesting thing that it. I don't disagree with it. I think you should be focusing on the playoff patch if you have the ability to. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't. So that to me was a really smart thing, and I really like the transparency they have. They're essentially saying we didn't prepare as much for this week, so if we don't look as good, that's why. But I still think they should win. I think they're a very good team, and they have enough just talent in general that they can just win these matches. My big pick for Sunday is the New York Excelsior taking on the Vancouver Titans. The match we've been waiting for, and I'm sure we've been waiting for it to be in much better circumstances than this. I think the fact that they put it at the end of the season wasn't a great idea, just because no one's going to really care about this match on either side, so it's going to be kind of a bad match. I kind of wish they played earlier in the season. I also don't, because Vancouver's would have been a lot better. I think the series would have been pretty one-sided. We got to see them in the playoffs where it did matter and the teams were trying. That was a pretty good series back in stage 2, but in general, I think this is the kind of thing you look at and you just go, it's not going to be a great match, but it's my big pick anyway, just because I don't want to pick the Valiant for both big pick games, especially because I don't think they're going to even come close to beating the Shock. But this one could be close, who knows, but I'm picking the Titans because I think they look better, obviously. Finally, we have the Shock versus the Valiant. Picking the Shock, I think they look a lot better right now than the Valiant do, and I think they look like the best team in the league. So I am picking the Shock to win that one. So those are all my picks for the homestand. Let's now take a look at the league standings, because boy, are they looking fun and fresh. So as you can see, we have a bunch of teams that have locked up their spot in the top 12. We have even 5 teams that have locked up their spot in the top 6. We have essentially a lot of movement potential for the season playoffs. The only spots that are locked up are your top 3 spots. Vancouver is your number 1 seed, New York's your number 2 seed, San Francisco is your number 3 seed. That can't change. Nothing will be able to change any of that happening. Obviously, San Francisco has the second best record and differential in the league, but because they are in the Pacific, they don't have the second overall seed because New York is in the Atlantic. So that's the one thing you really need to keep in mind. But you look and you can see where a lot of this movement is possible to happen. Actually, the Hunters right now are in the top 12. The LA Valiant, with a win, a single win, would eliminate the Hunters from the season playoffs, and the Valiant would get in the playoffs instead. I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately, for the Valiant. I think that they have, if they won one map 5 earlier in the season, just one, they'd be in the season playoffs. Right now, they would already be in the season playoffs. They would be 13-13 plus 2. They'd be in the season playoffs. But unfortunately, they're not, because they didn't win those matches when they really, really needed to. And now they're on the outside looking in. The Shanghai Dragons, of course, are locked in mainly because they can't drop below anybody. The Valiant, or they could drop below the Valiant, but they can't drop below the Chengdu Hunters, because the Hunters, the best they could be is 14-15. Or, well, the best they can be is 13-11 minus 15. The worst the Dragons can be is 13-14 minus 10, or 13-15 minus 10, sorry. So that's why they're ahead of the Hunters. That's why they're locked up. The Valiant are able to, if they win one match or both matches, pass the Dragons. But I would expect them to only win one, if they even win one at all. So that's really where the most interesting stuff is in that 12 spot. The 12 and 13 spot is going to be the Chengdu Hunters. Is going to be the LA Valiant. We'll have to wait and see if the Valiant do make it in. The only playoff team from the first season that do not make it back is the Boston Uprising. Obviously, there's 12 versus 6 this year, so there's twice as many teams. So the chances of the teams making it back isn't that weird. But I mean, you got the Excelsior and the Gladiators and the Spitfire right now in the top 3. The Fusion are down a little lower, so not in a great spot. And then maybe the Valiant, probably not though, in my opinion. But they always have a chance, and I'd certainly like to see them get in. I'd like to see the story of them going from 0-7 to season playoffs, even if they don't make it very far in the top 12. I'd just like to see it anyway. Obviously, as I mentioned before, the Reign could jump into the top 5. They could jump the Gladiators, or they could jump into the top 6 at the number 6 spot and jump the Spitfire only. It would be interesting, of course. Now, obviously, they're not guaranteed because it could be a 3-2 win, and they'd get the plus 15, and the Gladiators could lose 3-2, and they would be at plus 16, and they would be the same record, but not as good of a differential. Obviously, it's not guaranteed if they win both of their matches and the Gladiators lose that the Reign would jump ahead of the Gladiators, but I would say it's more likely because I don't really think the Reign's matches will be super close, but obviously it's not a guarantee that that'll happen. But I think you look at the top 6, it's really interesting to see the Spitfire potentially not even in the top 6, and I would say likely not even in the top 6. That's kind of crazy. They've been really kind of holding on to that spot for a while, and if they were to drop to number 7, be interesting. Now, I don't think they would have many issues if they dropped to number 7. The team they would have to play would be either the Charge, or not the Charge, the Fusion, the Dragons, or the Hunters, or the Valiant. Depending on who of those teams was the lowest seeded team to win in the first round of the play-in tournament. I think the Spitfire would beat the Fusion. I think they would beat the Dragons. I think they would beat the Hunters. I think they'd beat the Valiant. The one where they maybe don't win is the Hunters, because the Hunters are just such a bizarre team. You can't really figure out what they're doing ever. But the Spitfire, I think, should be in the top 8 by the end of the play-in tournament. Whether or not it's because they're top 6 or they advance from playing in the play-in tournament, we'll see. But the Dynasty are in the kind of position, to me, that are it's the most precarious position, because if the Charge win, which they likely will, they will have to play the Seoul Dynasty, and the Seoul Dynasty I don't think are good enough right now to really beat the Charge, because the Charge look to be the top team in this meta. So it's going to be a really, really, really interesting series. Some of these matches here, but you can see a lot of these spots are still kind of fluid. Like the Dynasty are guaranteed to be ahead of the Charge, who are guaranteed to be ahead of the Fusion, who are guaranteed to be ahead of the Dragons. But it's the fact that, they could technically move around a little bit depending on what happens. I think it's a whole weird thing. It's because of the Reign, because the Reign could go 14-14. They could go 15-13. They could go 16-12. It just depends on what happens with the Reign, really, that decides where all these teams will end up in the standings. But we will see eventually where all this stuff ends up. It's going to be a big week for the Overwatch League for the final week of the regular season. I'm glad we're at a point where we're in the final week and there are matches this week that really matter, because it makes the final week a lot more interesting. So it'll be exciting. But that's all I got for you this week. It's been a great season so far doing these. I'm hoping next season will be just as fun, and hoping the playoffs, of course, will be even better as well. Can't forget those are still going on. But thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing to see more stuff like this in the future. It means a lot if you can give me your support, because that helps out a lot. But I'm going to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.